Okay, everyone, thanks to me and technology, we're already running late. I can train a dog, I can break a horse in, I've been droving, but I cannot work a computer very well. And we just found out that Sam's having trouble walking at the moment too, but his walking's improved, my technology's improved, it's all good. So look, welcome everyone here. I'll be very quick with my intro. Just wanted to say thank you for being here today, and also I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're having this conference. So it's very important that we acknowledge those guys, because they're very, the traditional owners here in Australia are very generous, especially in agriculture, with working with us so we can better, did it go off again? Understand, I think I've done something really bad to the computer, sorry, to help us manage our land better, okay, because they've got a lot more years of experience, tens of thousands of years of successful land management experience. So today, this afternoon, we've got some really great sessions, starting out with, actually before we do that, it was Sam, righto. We have to thank Rabobank, and we do want to do that. And Sam from Rabobank, now Sam's role manager, he's Senior Manager for Sustainability, Product Solutions and Design, is that right, Sam? There you go, client transition. Yeah, so look, just want to thank Rabobank very much for supporting Landcare and this room and agriculture and their work in agriculture. So yeah, welcome to the stage, Sam, and sorry to sort of be running late for this.
No worries at all. I'll be very quick. Just briefly wanted to thank everybody for coming today. Rabobank's very proud to sponsor the Sustainable Agriculture and Soil Health session. We think it's really important. We've heard a lot over the last couple of days around collaboration, and we've seen that through the AWI presentations and Grovia, and we'll see that with Ruminati this afternoon as well. There's a common theme this afternoon around resilience, and I think it's really important that when we're looking at collaboration in this space, that we're really looking at opportunity around value creation for the land managers out there, so that when we're looking at transition and implementation of these sustainable farming practices, that there's a real value proposition for the land managers out there. So once again, thank you for this afternoon. Enjoy the sessions. They're going to be fascinating. And yeah, Rabo's really proud to support this. So thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Sam, and thank you once again. Rabobank is really supporting us in innovation in ag, and we know that's where it's at. We are people that can innovate. We need support to actually drive that innovation into practice. So look, thank you so much. Today we're just going to build on yesterday's interesting sessions, okay, and our first speaker today is... Yeah, I know. I was just looking at Dr. Christopher McDonough. I was like, okay, Dr. Christopher McDonough, Dr. Chris McDonough. So Chris is coming from Mallee Sustainable Farming Systems, where soil salinity is an increasing problem in that sort of low rainfall Mallee type environment, and it undermines productivity and viability of businesses out there. Chris has worked with farmers and producers to trial innovative solutions, from loosen strips to salt-tolerant grasses, backed by decision support tools and remote sensing. So Chris is going to show us how all this information is pulling together to support his producers. So thanks, Chris, and over to you.
Good. Thank you very much. I have to speak into this microphone, is that right? Okay, so just quickly, by way of introduction, just brief background. Yes, I was the person that Costa was referring to this morning as being at the first Landcare conference. So I was, and that's me with hair, doing salt watch with some kids down on the York Peninsula. So I started off as a Landcare officer based here in Kadina, but there, and then moved out into the Mallee area here, working with Mallee Sustainable Farming in Dunlop and Eyre Peninsula. This is me in my natural habitat. Love being in the so working with farmers, the sort of soils agronomy. And I've done a bit of lecturing at Adelaide Uni as well, and these are all third-year ag students, and done a bit of work over in Africa and the Middle East, trying to get them to understand their soils. I just tend to not even look at subsoils over there, and so yeah, done a lot of work over there as well. So today I've got a lot to get through, so I'll rush through as quick as I can, but we're right. So I want to talk about the salt problem, and then I want to talk specifically about Mallee seeps, which is a new problem which has come with our changing farming systems. As we've moved to sustainable farming systems, sometimes we create other problems as well. So I'll talk about that. And dry saline land as well, which is a problem that it's been like an insidious cancer that's been getting worse and worse and worse. And as we've moved into different climate changes and stuff, and where there's longer drier periods, that's become worse. And so we'll talk about that. But on the way, I just want to sort of talk about I want you to notice how we're working with the farmers to bring about the change, and also some of the decision trees and the things that we can use. And maybe you might think about using in your own land care things, some of the ways that you can help get the messages across. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So just quickly, there's 4 main types of salinity impacting farmlands that I'm dealing with. I've talked about dry saline land and Mallee seeps, as opposed to regional groundwater and creekline salinity, which is harder to manage because the actual problem is being caused on a bigger, wider catchment, and there's less options to really change that, whereas the first 2 are things that you can actually help to fix on farms. So one of the things that we try and do is getting the message, getting the science right, and working with farmers in finding practical solutions. And so one of the things that we've done is made these little animations of how salt works, because if farmers actually understand how it works, then they've got a much better idea of how they need to change their management to fix some of the problems. And so here's just an example of a little animation. I made the storyboard, I made the text to go with it, but it actually explains some of the science that really helps the farmers to understand it. So I'm just going to play a little section out of one of these, and that might help you as well.
Soil salinity will directly impact a plant's ability to function. One way they move moisture and nutrients from the soil into their roots is through osmotic pressure. They do this by making their fine root hairs very salty. Water is attracted from the less saline soil to more saline roots, transferring nutrients with it. As soil salinity escalates, the osmotic potential diminishes, reducing the plant's ability to absorb water and essential nutrients from the soil, thereby impeding its growth. When soil salinity exceeds the salinity created within the root hairs, this potential is reversed and plants dehydrate and die. High concentrations of sodium chloride can also cause chemical imbalances and physical stresses, and can be directly toxic to plants, as well as impeding initial seed germination. Some saline-tolerant plants, such as Puccinelia grass, are able to exclude the salt while taking in water into their roots. Other saline-tolerant plants, such as saltbush, are able to absorb saline water into their system and then exude the salt out from their leaves.
So that's just an example of just simple thing that we've got on our website and in our decision trees that farmers can look at even on their tractors and get an idea of things. So I just had these extra slides just in case the animation didn't work. So Mallee seeps. So this is a problem that has come, and in 2013 we were standing out with a farmer on this land saying, this is some of my best land, and we've just come through the millennium drought, and then we had a really wet 2010-11 period with a lot of off-season rainfall, and all of a sudden these areas started to either fill up with water or then turn into these scolds like that. And so we thought, right, we've got to actually work out what's going on, which we did. And again, this is another animation I made, but I'm just going to talk you through it. But basically, what we found the problem was that traditional farming systems had a lot of summer weeds, problem summer weeds like skeleton weed on their sandhills, but they were actually perennial, deep-rooted, and anytime you got big summer rains, they actually used up all the excess moisture. But when we moved to no-till farming systems, so I'm talking in dry agriculture, that's like 250 to 350 mil rainfall. You need to make every drop of moisture productive, and so they do summer weed control. But when they did that, then what happened was that you get big rains over summer. Some of that rain will leach down, hit an impervious clay layer, and then start to move laterally and form these perched water tables, localised perched water tables, that then gradually you get a little bit of water, the water carrying a bit of salt from the soil, evaporates and capillary rise, wicks to the surface and leaves a bit of salt behind at the surface, and that's why the plants start to die. And then any time those areas bear out, you get so much more over the summer, the evaporation, the capillary rise, and it just quickly deteriorates. And so here's just some examples of those perched water tables. And, you know, I've stood out with these farmers and put holes in the ground. I said, how far do you think to the water table here? And then you suddenly show them that it's like 50, 60 centimetres down. They just can't believe that there's a water table that's formed there. And here you can see it's just oozing out of the sand. Sometimes those water tables are a metre, 2 metres of sloppy clay or sloppy sand or whatever. Sometimes it's only 10, 15 centimetres, you know, even just sitting just below on the impervious clay layer that's driving this salinity issue. So, and yeah, some of the problems, big lot of land, of productive land going to waste. Yes, if you're a tractor driver, keep your wits about you, because that's happened quite a bit. Weed problems. And the other thing too, in low rainfall areas, like, it's just crazy that we're trying to turn every drop of water into something that produces something good, and yet it's actually degrading the land instead. So we need to change things around. So the two main strategies for fixing mallee seeps, and yeah, when we did surveyed farmers, like there's like 50,000, 100,000 hectares that have gone out to this, you know, and so it is a big issue that we're trying to fix. But the main thing is, yeah, establishing soil cover over the discharge zone or the scolds, and then the other thing, doing something to lower the approach water table. And then we have found that we actually have been able to stop the spread. We've been able to produce good pasture and sometimes even bring back to full crop production, but early detection is the key to be able to manage it well. And so just on establishing living soil cover, Puxonelia, which has been around for a long time, it's a salt-tolerant grass, as you can see the strip of pucks there versus everything else. And so once you get it established, so here's an old salt scald, and we've completely covered it over, stopped the spread, which is good. And part of it, the thing is, this is a Puxonelia plant. You see how thick that root system is, that it goes down to 30 or 40 centimetres. So not only does it provide cover that then stops a lot of the evaporation and capillary rise, but it also means that the slightly salty water that's sort of coming to the surface actually gets used up at 20, 30, 40 centimetres depth. So that salt never gets to the surface to then concentrate in the surface layers. The lowering the water table, perched water table, we found lucerne to be a really good option, and even just 1 cedar width is often enough to dry out the perched water tables. Often those perched water tables are, you know, still fairly not that salty. And yeah, within 12 to 18 months of establishing lucerne, a strip, can be enough to drain out a water table. And so in that case, we've just done that here, and we've got Puxonelia there, and we've basically stopped this whole flat going out. Sometimes if we have to test the water, if it's highly saline, we might have to then move towards salt-tolerant trees, which can have higher salinity, but it does take longer to draw down the water table. We also use things like NDVI mapping. So here's a paddock near Pinaroo in South Australia, and my pointer, I've got my finger over the pointer. So you can see here's sand hills, here's some patches of salt starting to go out. But when we use NDVI mapping, we sort of look for, in October, November, what areas are staying greener for longer when the rest of the paddock is drying out. And you can see we've got a patch of salt there, but the actual perched water table goes right along here. So we actually need to treat the whole area, not just around here, otherwise this is all going to go out. So just some of the tools that we use with satellite imaging to help us manage these problems. On the Mallee Sustainable Farming website, we've got this decision tree, which has got my little animation on it. And it's got me just discussing a little video of out in a seep, discussing the 5 steps that you need to go to assess and then manage mallee seeps. First one is it a mallee seep and not one of the other types of salinity? There's instructions around that, but once you decide that it's that side, you click on that and that'll take you down a branch of the tree. The second step is, assessing the landscape, and so you need to do that. The The third step is, well, what stage is the Mallee seep out? Because there's a lot more options for management where it's just a waterlogging problem that's, as opposed to a full-on scald that's been around for many, many years. And so you click on one of those tabs, it'll take you to a different branch of the tree. Then it's a case of measuring the salinity of the water table. I often just use a taste test. If I taste the subsoil water and think, yeah, that's tasty enough, I could feed stock with that, then it's probably in that mild case, mild to medium, rather than the high to very high. And again, you click on the right button and it'll take you eventually to some instructions on what you need to do in what zone, but also a whole bunch of little farmer videos where we've had trials and shown how and we're talking with farmers, so they're practical solutions farmers can relate to and seeing real results. And so here's just an example. This is at Kimber on the Eyre Peninsula, an area that went out very, very quickly after 2016. This is the farmer saying what they did, and then they planted a strip of lucerne. This whole area was sort of going out. And then, this is what we got to, a highly productive with lucerne, Puxinellia over the scald, the water, this soil going back to good again. And you see when we got the lucerne, this is a piezometer that measures the water levels. We got the lucerne established in that year. In that summer of that, after that, we had 10 inches of rain in one day. And yes, there was a spike in the water table, but the lucerne drank it all out and dried it all out completely. So we basically showed we've fixed this problem and we're bringing it back. So there's another few examples like that around the place. So just turning this into this within a few years. In some cases where it suits with the good thing about lucerne is the farmer can drive his tractors over it, can sow through it and everything else, so it's not too impeding on his farming system. But if you're going to trees, that is more problematic from an accessibility point of view, but often when you've already got a track there, here we put 5 rows of trees, and that was and this is tall wheatgrass, there is a salt-tolerant grass. This one here, I went out to another spot and with my whippersnipper, this is a whole lot of Puxinellia seed here and just bagged up a whole lot, and then I walked across this salt scald, as you can see, and just threw it out as I went. And it rained on it, got growing, and then within 12 months it's completely covered and stopped spreading. So there's all sorts of innovative ways you can look at. This farmer wanted to use some of the water so for his stock, and as he's in a catchment where it was all coming into one place, so he actually put in a proper sump underground. You can't collect and use slightly salty water and leave it open to the elements, because it'll go putrid pretty quickly. A bit like what we were talking about yesterday with covering dams and stuff. So he's got a proper covered dam, so that's sitting in under there, and he pumps it out up to his shanty, does it with other water, and he's been able to use that for stock management as well. On our peninsula, which they're really short of water, which is quite handy. It only works where your water table is fresh enough to be able to do it, and you've got more water coming in. So that's just some stuff we've done around Mallee seeps. In terms of dry saline land, an older problem, but it's sort of becoming, with climate change in particular, becoming worse and worse, and a lot more. There could be 1 million hectares of this which is being affected. It's not to do with the perch water table, it's more to do, here's some sites here on some stony ground. Other area, this is near Manangatang in Victoria, and this is a spot near where I live where just the salinity is just starting to wear down the plant's ability to get the moisture out of the ground, and so you see that sort of just poor growth. And again, we've made this is part of the animation, but in terms of why it is a problem, is all of our clays have natural salts down in them. And so what we find is that when you get big rainfalls, you get a full profile of water, then that actually mobilises some of that salt. But then when that is followed, and that starts to move up as the sun comes out, you get drought periods or summer periods, the salt starts to move up, the water evaporates and leaves the salt behind in the surface, and it accumulates, and then eventually you get patchiness and things starting to die. And particularly where you've got things like sheep any time where you've got, the worst thing you can have for this ground is to be bare over the summer. And so when you add sheep into the system, they love to bear out ground. Any sheep farmers here at all? You would know that. So some of the management is we've got to actually change on these paddocks that are, we've got to do a lot more lot feeding rather than having, or feed it much later in the autumn rather than through the summer. But you can see that accumulation effect is a huge problem. So what can happen sometimes on this sort of ground is you get a big rainfall and it does tend to leach a bit of the water down. And in some cases that means you can grow some grounds, but a lot of the areas just has become too bad. So there's two things happen when it rains. You get a bit of leaching, but you also get a lot of the salts here a lot more diluted, and so the plants can actually start to grow. So this is an example of the last 2 years of one of my sites near Murray Bridge. And this was it was very dry, much drier start. You can see much bigger patching. This year, the opening rain was a bit bigger, and so the patching was a bit smaller, but still, sometimes you get areas that still come right back. But what we're seeing more and more is there's too much salt that's come up over time that it's not even coming back after a big start of the season. We've done lots of science on it, and so we've had, why is it growing here but not there? And we've measured the salts. Sometimes it's because the salt profile is different between there and there in the base. Sometimes it's exactly the same, but there might be, in this case, there's some stone there that's stopping the wicking effect. But in this case, it was the topsoil on this clay had actually eroded over here and not on this lot here. And so this is just becomes like a vacuum cleaner of the wicking effect, the capillary rise from clay to clay to clay all the way up, whereas this had a sandy loam and kept the cover of growth on there. Even though it's quite salty underneath, it was enough to keep the growth and the cover to change those patches. So we're doing a lot of science on that. And again, on the Mallee Sustainable Farming website, which is up there, we've got this decision tree where I have stuff on how to recognise it. We've got the videos on how it works, how we use some of the tools to tell the difference between different types of saline land. And then we've got these four, this decision tree is more, okay, if you can do this, good. If you can't do that, go to the next one or whatever. And certainly the first thing is try and maintain soil cover all the time. And when the farmers can, again, we've got case studies or podcasts or videos on this with plenty of examples, but I was really surprised that even just one summer of putting some cover over or maintaining some cover has been the difference between what you grow the next year. And I was quite surprised that, that's just, we put this cover out beforehand and it was a difference between, 2 saline to get a germinated crop over here versus growing something. So, if you have a couple of years of this, then it just becomes worse and worse. And here's a farmer who had a chaff cart, collected all his seed. He basically, this is his normal area over here where this area would go out to salt, as you can see in 2020, the year. So green is growing, orange is not. And yet here he put 5 hectares of just 5 centimetres, the chaff on top, and then in 2023, suddenly, some of his best growing ground. So we can turn it around with the right management. Oh my goodness. All right, we're going okay. 5 minutes that was. So the other thing too is farmers, if they've got a sand source close, putting 8 centimetres of sand on top, and that's quite good, and that can be quite a long-term fix as well. With the soil cover, you've always got to maintain the soil cover, otherwise it can return to be salty again. But with sand, we've had farmers that, 5, 10 years down the track that have been able to, they basically permanently fixed it. And while it's a fair expense up front to shift that much sand, the reality is if you're growing nothing on this land here, and it's costing you $150 a hectare to grow, and growing a 3-tonne, 2-tonne crop here, over 5 years, you've more than made up the economics of that. There's just an example from this year of a site. And the good thing too is we found out after a couple of years of having the sand on top that the original salty layer goes back to healthy again. All right, whenever you're trying to treat the topsoil, don't ever mix the clay to the surface, otherwise you can have problems like that. We tried spading in sand and stuff like that, but here's some good results there. This is pretty important. We started to realise in the last few minutes I've got here, the use of opportunity to see rainfall. We stopped, instead of just measuring the top 10 centimetres of soil salinity, we started to measure 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and we actually found that it was the 0 to 5 can actually fluctuate from highly, highly saline, 2 or 3 times saltier than what's just below it, to then you get a big rain and actually can come right down to what is actually not saline enough to, you can actually grow a crop. And so our feeling is that there's just this window of opportunity after a decent rain that the farmers can go in. If they time it right, they might be able to get germination, get cover that then they can then maintain and then start to turn it around. And I often use the example of a glass of water with the farmers. I put a bit of salt in the bottom and I put a little bit of water and I try and drink it and I just sort of spit it out in horror. You suddenly fill that up to half full and you can drink it, no worries, even though it's a bit salty. It's the same for the plant roots in that situation. So, moving to my finish, the fourth thing is if it's so bad you might have to go to salt bush plantings and stuff like that. So we've done a lot around salt varieties. In MSF, we've got a whole lot of tools that farmers write into. What's your soil questions? We've got a 101 book there that they can look at online. I've got a whole chapter on that, and there's podcasts that go with that, talking to farmers. And we've got this whole Soils Connect thing that, again, is a way that farmers are interacting. I've got a video that goes with this, but I won't, there's no time to show it, but I'll just, that talks...
Looking to learn more about soil health and farming?
But I'll go right, but there's a whole lot of setup with that MSF is doing that farmers can interact with the soils. So in conclusion, yes, there's a whole lot of problems. With the things with climate change, what we've got to realise is that yes, if there's a drying climate, but also there's wet periods. If we can make the most of the wet periods, we can then manage the ground through the dry periods better. And so that's how we need to adapt with this problem to climate change. Lots of resources out there. Lots of people to thank, Landscapes Boards, GRDC, Landcare, Future Drought Funding, Mallee Sustainable Farming. That's me done.
Thanks so much, Chris. Can you hear me? Is that microphone working? Is that working now?
You can speak in up here otherwise.
How do I make it work? Hello, hello. It is on. Okay. Sorry, Chris. Thank you so much, Chris. And yes, I'm about to ask for questions. What a fantastic, smart man. We're lucky to have you. What an interesting soil landscape. Hey, Cam, I think Cam's sitting there going, I'm glad I don't have to deal too much with that, although Cam would probably love it because soils people like challenges. So, look, thank you. Do I have some questions? Okay, I'm going to take just two from this gentleman here, and there's a guy in the back corner who had his hand up before. So, Alan?
Are you seeing, with the seasonal change, much spread in South Australia, like we are in central west New South Wales? Huge expansion in salinity?
Yeah, so in those dry periods, sometimes you just get the crops don't grow because of high clay and there's not a plant available water. But yeah, we're seeing a lot more of this. Not only the problems where it's not growing in the dry because of the clay, but also because more salt's getting to the surface. And if I went, on Eyre Peninsula, the upper Eyre, they have paddocks that unless they get a good rain in autumn, they won't even sow the paddock. So yes, it is growing. And I think it's been accumulating over time, but we're getting to the stage where it's the straw that's breaking the camel's back has arrived. And so, that's where if we can, the value of soil cover, often we've talked about, you've got to have the soil cover for erosion control, but soil health over summer, we cannot underestimate how much just having a bit of cover over our soils in summer is huge for all soil biology and all soil goodness. All good?
Thank you so much, Chris.
I
said I don't need the PA. I've got a PA.
Okay, cool. We've actually run out of time for questions. Sorry. Sorry about that. It's my fault, technology. I do apologise. And now I've got to get out of this, don't I?